Okay, now that you've registered with JIRA and you've logged into your account, you should be on your dashboard and you won't see anything, any projects yet. So to start our project off, go up here to the right hand corner, create project, select next gen is something new. I haven't tried that yet, but we'll go with this classic, and you can name your project whatever. Create, and this should take you to your backlog. Okay, and this is going to be a place where if you were the product owner, whenever you guys get to set up the project, you're going to have a meeting, and there'll be product owner, the scrum master, and the development team, and you guys will get together and you'll work on what JIRA calls issues, and you'll create these issues. All of these issues build your project. So there's several types of issues. There's stories, tasks, and bugs. So the way it works, usually teams, they don't follow set rules and they do things differently. What I like to do is I don't like to just create issues and brainstorm like that, because what ends up happening is you create all these issues, and then once you create the issues, the product owner has to then organize those issues into groups called epics. Or he doesn't have to, or he can just set his own little buckets. But each of those will account towards a sprint, and we'll get into sprints later. But what I like to do is I like to start off with epics first, and I create epics first. I think it's a little bit more organized. If you do it this way, you start with epics and you don't have to create all these issues and then organize. It's already organized because you're categorizing all of the tasks beforehand. And what epics are they're what I call milestones or features. They're the main subsets of your project. So let's create our first epic here, and this is mainly going to be for the developer side. We need a framework to set up to build our project in, so we're going to call this setup a monorepo. And I give some examples here. A framework for our project. We'll just keep it simple. Create. Now you can see your epics are here on the side, and it has its own issues, which again, epics will be consisting of stories or issues, but we won't be working in that way. I'll explain what I mean in a minute. So there's one epic. Another epic that I can think of offhand is we want to set up a user registration login system, and description would be the database and models set up for both front end and back end. Well, actually, database models and Alright, this is just a starter. And again, I want to say that this is very simplistic for this project. For a big project where you got multiple teams or whatnot, the planning out and all this is not just going to happen in a few minutes. Some teams end up doing this for several days, even weeks, just to set up and to building up this backlog. And you'll find backlogs with hundreds of lines, tasks, and this is very simplified, but the concepts are the same. So with that being said, we'll start with the mono repo, and we'll build inside of that mono repo. We'll build either a story or a task. Now this is for stories. What I like to do is create everything in stories. So with the stories are created. They've come up with this convention where you state the user, then what they can do, and why they want to do it. So basically, for our user here, which is not a user, but the character, so to speak, will be a developer. For this is the role that's being played here. So we'll state a story as a developer, I want to create a space for project so I can build a project. It's very generic, could be a little bit more specific, but it's our first story, and as you can see, it's got this this tag, so to speak, set up with our epic. So if we go to another epic, you won't see that issue. If you go to if you want to see all the issues, it'll show all of them, but we only created this one. So after we've created our first story, you can add subtasks to the story. Some ways you can build out your backlog is actually stories in the hierarchy of a backlog. They're the same. They're the same with level with tasks, but in our case, we won't do that. And the difference between stories and tasks, or stories, they're for the user, the customer's benefit, whereas a task doesn't really benefit the customer directly. For instance, like a customer wants on his website, on a customer facing page, let's say on the login, or let's say let's just say for a user story which we'll build in the future for the front end, we want to build a login component where people can log in. That's beneficial to the customer. You know, they can see that, oh, I can log in or register, versus a task, whereas I might put in for a task, build a test case for the user login. So we're building a test which it has no direct benefit with the customer. They don't gain any benefits from us building that. But when they see a login component and they can log in, they feel they've been benefited. So I don't differentiate tasks and stories like that. I'd rather just leave tasks underneath stories. So stories, just all the backlog you'll just see is stories with subtasks. So now that we've got one story, we can click on this here, and this shows the details of the story. And what's significant about here is you want to go to the story points, and we're going to make this 16 story points. And what story points are a way to gauge how long something takes. So I'm saying this takes 16 story points to take, where one story point can be anything that your team deems takes 1 point. So in my case, I use a measure of 30 minutes per story point. So 30 minutes per story point with 16, that means it's approximately 8 hours, or exactly 8 hours. So I'm saying that we build this out, the setup for a monorepo, in 8 hours. It could be a lot less. This I haven't timed yet, so we're going to time this, but I'm estimating, and this is how you build out your estimations. You just estimate how long it'll take. And why we use story points instead of time, like hours, because story points, once you get it talking into a point system, then once you start doing it, it's easier to talk with points instead of half an hours and hours. There's a whole theory behind using story points, which I like, so that's why I'm using it. So we're using story points, 16 points, and you can look at the other things here. But now, as we get the points up there, we can keep going with the rest, but normally after the team has set up and after their meeting they set up all of their backlog, the product owner will go in, and then he'll start taking these stories and building sprints out of it, and that's what we're going to do next. So here you see this button here, create sprint. We're going to create a sprint, and we're going to call this sprint sprint, and we're going to change sprint 1 to A. And why I did that is because sprints generally are anywhere from a week to 4 weeks, and you don't want to go over 4 weeks. That's the general rule about making sprints. And normally sprints usually go in 2 week sessions. So I like to work in 2 weeks building out features. So since there's 2 weeks in a project and you want to estimate this in a year, well, then you can use the alphabet, because there's 26 letters in the alphabet, and there'll be 26 sprints, 2-week periods in a year. So this is why you can the naming convention is using the alphabet. And with the alphabet, you can later on, once you're progressing, you can refer back to these sprints, and it's easier to refer to like sprint A or B or C. So that's what we're going to do. And now once you create a sprint on a bigger project, and when you're in a real production environment, usually what will happen is all of these sprints will be created. So we're going to sprint 2, and we'll call this B, and you can create all up to Z if you wanted. Normally when you have all these tasks and the product owner is putting them into sprints, how many tasks you have dictates how many sprints you'll create. But since for brevity's sake, we don't want to go through all that. Like I said, it could take a big project like weeks to build up a backlog. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to go sprint by sprint. And so now that we've created 2 sprints, see, all you have to do to get this issue into a sprint is you just drag it to the sprint. And now this sprint has this story. And again, if we had more issues we'd drag them until it's all emptied out. And as you can see, if we go to the backlog, there's no issues here. And so once that's complete, then you're ready to go ahead and start a sprint. As a product owner, you'll look through everything. And product owners, if you don't know what a product owner, they own the whole project. They're the ones that go and talk with the customers in the meetings and get what the customer wants written down. So once that's all done, then you got the Scrum Manager who heads up the Scrum. Once this is ready to go and you're starting sprints, then you have a Scrum Master who heads the Scrum meetings, which are daily meetings and monthly meetings, and he reviews the velocity of the sprints and how fast your project is progressing. So that will be the Scrum Manager. But since we're our own team, we're our own product owner, we're our own Scrum Manager, we handle everything. So what we're going to do, unless you got somebody who's working for you, but you can assign these tasks to them. But once you have the stories that you want in the sprint, you go ahead and you'll start a sprint, which is what we'll do. And as you can see here, it's already defaulted to the standard 2 weeks, and we're going to start. Today is November 8th. We will change that and we will start this tomorrow and end it 2 weeks from tomorrow. It's automatically set there, and you can put a sprint goal here. For our means, it's not necessary. Alright, so we got our first sprint started up. Okay, and so in the next video, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about, this is the workflow, and this is where your development team is going to look and see what their tasks are, what they have to do. This is where the Scrum Manager looks to see what people are doing, what they're working on, what's getting done. And here, once we're getting into this story, we're going to build out the tasks for this story. Alright, so that's what we'll do in the next video. See you then.